Well, welcome to another episode from Virtualize Everything. And I was scrolling through Facebook, what probably to most of you guys will be a week ago, and a comment asking for help came up from one of the Proxmox groups that I kind of follow, whether it's to get ideas for media or just kind of hear about things going on, or generally help people because that's what this channel is all about anyways, and I do that even outside of the channel. So with that, I read the comment and decided it would be a great project to work on today as I had some free time and create a video because I had generally had a lot of problems myself with cloud init images, and I don't even know if I truly learned them the way I should have. I kind of found a way that worked for myself and developed a workflow that works. And sometimes I don't even use them because, well, I just find it easier to do an install, template the install, and then just copy and paste the install. That being said, cloud images can be a little bit more flexible to work with than a straight up install in some ways. So with that, let's jump over to my desktop, and here's my Proxmox web interface for our demo system that we play around with a little bit. And we're going to first need to open a shell so that we can work with Proxmox on a command line. And we're going to do that by selecting our server right here and then clicking shell. Now my shell's already open on my monitor, and we can jump over there and take a look. So here on the upper right hand side, kind of squished in there so I could make my shell as large as possible, are some commands that we're going to work with today. These are basically the commands we'll be using. Maybe a little bit of change, but they'll give you the general gist. You can replace Ubuntu 23.04.qcow2 with whatever I use. That'll be basically the change. Now, going back to my desktop, I want to take a look at this web page right here, and I found it by Googling Ubuntu 23.04 cloud init image, and this is what came up. So there's a lot of different images here and a lot of different information for many different purposes on this web page. But I basically looked down through the web page and I found the image I wanted right here, and I'm going to just right click on it and do copy link address, and that's going to give me the address of that file. Now heading back over to our Proxmox web interface, or our shell rather, not our web interface, I can just type wget and then I can paste that URL in here. And with that URL pasted in, press enter. I did seem to be rate limited a little bit, whether it was from my internet connection, high usage, or something. It took nearly an hour to download this file. So I'm not going to go ahead and download this file again for you, but that's how you download it. Instead, I'm going to delete my way back here, and I'm just going to run an ls and show you that it's here, and you can see that this file of the same name is right there. So at this point, this is where I'm going to start entering commands. And the first command I want to do is I want to go ahead and copy that name, and I'm going to just run a cp, and I'm going to paste the name in. And then I'm going to call this Ubuntu 23-04, and I'm going to change that to qcow2. So this got really weird, and I actually ended up finding this on a Linux TV or Watch Linux TV episode on doing cloud inits as I watched through that. And apparently img and qcow2 are close enough that we can just convert them by changing names. Now, it's funny because later in this process, we're going to need to have the file in qcow2 or a command's not going to work. So I don't exactly understand the difference, but this is kind of the secret that I struggled with when I started which is resizing these files. It kind of makes it work, and I was shocked by it. I turned to that video after probably a week of research, and that's what I came up with, and it all worked. So great, it works. But this is also going to allow me to keep my root image the same. So we can see now that we have a Ubuntu 2304 qcow2 image that we can work with. So from there, I'm going to install some software here, and this software is going to allow me to work with the image, and it's meant for kind of working with cloud images, and it allows us to execute commands and install things into the image so we can customize it and make it our own. So in order to install that, I'm actually going to install it directly, or have installed it directly on my Proxmox server, because I kind of felt it should be there. So I started out playing with it on an Ubuntu VM and kind of just moved on over to using it here after I gained a little bit of trust with it. So the command to install this is going to be apt-install, and I'm calling this libguest-fs tools, and I'm going to hit enter here so it installs. You can see that I didn't have any updates or anything that needed to be applied to it, but that's going to go ahead and give us the toolkits for the rest of the project here. So now the first thing I want to do is go ahead and run a command that is going to install qemu-guest-agent. And, you know, we're working with VMs in Proxmox, right? Like qemu-guest-agent is a great tool to have, whether you're working with any VM, right? It gives us our IP address, it gives us more accurate feedback, it makes communication easier, that, you know, goes on. But we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to do that with a virt-customize-a, and then we're going to apply our image name, which you saw us create here, Ubuntu 2304.qcow2. And then I'm going to put a -- install and a qemu-guest-agent. And that'll go ahead and add qemu-guest-agent to this image. Now, I necessarily probably should have done this first, and best practices definitely would have been to do it first, but let's go ahead and update the repository by adding the command --run command, and then in single quotes, apt-get update. And then if there's any updates that need to be applied at this time, let's go ahead and do that again with a --run command, and in single quotes, apt-get upgrade -y. Now, you don't have to really do these last two commands as necessarily part of the video. I just like to have my images up to date, and it's just something I do periodically, as if I'm in here doing other things, as I update them, just to save myself time and whatnot. You know, depending on your production environment and what's tested and whatnot, this might not be the way you want to go, but that's part of your customizing stuff. I do a lot of like testing, and I like to just keep things up to date. It makes things easier when I'm making tutorials and whatnot, and so that's what I do. Now, to start making the user account, because we're actually not going to fully use all of Proxmox's Cloud Init stuff. And because of that, we have to put our own user account in. And we're going to do that with the add user command. So again, just as we've kind of done these other updates and stuff, we're going to run a --run command, and then an add user, and we're just going to add a user, and we're going to call it test today because we have no particular reason to call it anything else. And you can see from my notes, I actually put the wrong symbol here. So I'll just press Control-C to end this, and we need to make sure they're single quotes, and this will run fine. All right, now that created a user account, a user home directory, and all the general stuff we need. So, but it did not add a password to the user account when we did it, and there was really no way of it knowing what the password would be. I tried echoing in this password on the command, kind of in the same format, and I didn't have much luck. And it might be something that somebody a little more experienced with this than me is. Again, I've said this 100 times on my channel. I'm here to learn with you guys, and I learn about Proxmox and virtualization and Linux and IT stuff in general at making these videos. And, you know, I'm not an expert. My background is actually in machine tool. It's not even in computers. I'm Joe Smo, making a channel, trying to help out my community and help out fellow people that love, you know, IT stuff as much as I do. Anyways, So because I couldn't get that to work, I am going to echo this in with the chpasswd command. And so we're going to call this password test22. It's going to the test account. So we're running the command in single quotes. And notice kind of the nested quotes here because it is important. So we start the command out by opening a single quote, echo, then we go to double quotes and we go test:test22. So username :password. Then we close that with a double quotes and we give ourselves a pipe delimiter to kind of specify the command we're going to run. We're running the command of chpasswd, and then we close it off with another single quote. Kind of a normal programming structure, feels kind of comfortable, probably for 95% of us. But kind of note that because it is a good feel and it's something good to understand in a lot more detail than I'm going to explain in this video, but it is something good to understand and be comfortable with formulating commands and understanding how things work. Anyways, we're going to execute that as I continue to talk. And the last thing we need to do, because we've created a user account and we've given it a password, but yeah, how you can use it now. There's going to be no root user on this account. There's going to be nothing. So how do you install software or work with it? Well, we're going to use sudo to do that, and the sudo comes built into this image and pre-baked in most of Ubuntu. But yeah, we need to add our user to the sudo user group in order to give our user sudo rights. And I'm going to do that with add user, username, and then sudo. It's kind of the way I'm most comfortable. I think we can do user group or user mod-ag or something if we're in straight Debian. But since we're in Ubuntu, we can use that add user tool that kind of packages all of the user and group management together that Ubuntu is so nice to provide us. So we're going to use it. All right, so we've kind of now created our image, and that's awesome. So the next thing we want to do, and kind of the final thing we're going to do before we go back to the Proxmox web interface and start creating our VM and kind of setting up everything for our VM, is to resize the VM. And we mentioned before, this is why we changed that file to a qcow2 from an image. Is this, for some reason, img doesn't work. I don't know. So we're gonna type qemu, and then we're gonna do -img, and we're gonna do a resize, and then we're gonna paste our file in here. And at the end, I want to make it 10 gigs, so I'm just gonna type 10g, and I'm gonna press enter, and that's gonna resize our file from the 3.2 whatever over to 10 gigs. All right, so we're gonna definitely have to come back to this web interface to finish doing some stuff, but we actually need to head over to our Proxmox web interface right here, and I have a tab here, and we're going to need to set up our VM. So we can do that by creating the VM, and we can call this test, whatever. Call it whatever you want. We'll call it test Ubuntu 23. And our OS, we're not going to use any media. We can leave Linux alone. The system, we're just going to check qemu-guest-agent. We applied that, we installed that in our image, and we can delete our disk at this point. And Ubuntu needs 2 CPU cores, 2 gigs of RAM. And for me, I have my VLAN set up this way on this bridge, so I'm not going to use the VLAN tagging. It's just how I have my stuff set up. I like it that way. That's that. So I'm going to select my VMBR1, which is my VLAN 60. That goes off into my network. All right, well, we're going to hit apply. And this is going to make our VM. We'll give it a second, it finishes off, and we need to go to hardware now at this point and go to add, and we're going to add a Cloud Init drive, and we're going to store that in local LVM. All right, so now that we have that all set up, we're going to go to Cloud Init, and we need to set up our network configuration by clicking ipconfig. For net 0, we're going to hit edit. I'm going to use DHCP, so I'm going to press OK. I'm not configuring username or password. I'm just leaving that all alone. I'm going to hit regenerate image. I don't know if you have to hit regenerate image at this point. I've just always done it. It's just what I do. Now, if we were to enter a username and password here, I'd need to have my image imported already in order for it to work. If I hit it regenerate image prior, it didn't work. So I don't think you have to, but that's that. And I'll show you multiple different login attempts here when we get to that point. And I'll show you that this doesn't seem to make any difference. We didn't create any odd user account, and we can't seem to log in with any perceivable password for root that I can think of. Maybe you can think of something, and drop a comment below if I'm wrong, because people need to know about that. Anyways, so we have our image, our VM created, and we're going to take note that it's 107, and we're going to go back to our shell, and we're going to enter the command qm, if I can type, qm import disk, and then we're going to type in 107. We're going to give it the name of our image file, and then we're going to tell it where we want to store it. Local LVM in my case, and it might be, a ZFS storage or something different for you, but usually it's local and something as default storage. I know you can set up a SAN or other things, and wherever you store your VM images is where that should go. And we can hit enter now at this point. Now notice the two 100% and a delay in time. It hasn't quite finished yet, and it delays for a few seconds, and then it'll give you the successfully imported. Now that it's successfully imported, we can actually head back to our web interface, go to hardware, and it shows up as an unused disk 0 under our 107. We're going to hit edit. I have an SSD in this system, so I'm going to turn on discard. You may or may not want to use that depending on your system configurations. And I'm going to hit add, and that's going to turn that into a disk. Now we're almost ready to boot this image and start playing with it. We now need to go to options because our boot order is all messed up as we didn't have a hard drive applied to the system. So here in our boot order, we're going to select boot order. We're going to hit edit, and we have all of these drives. We're going to check our new SCSI drive that we added our image to, and I like to move it to the top just for ease of booting so it doesn't try to read the CD and then network boot and so on and so forth. I just move it to the top. Now I can hit start at this point, and I can start my console. And we can see our lovely boot process taking effect here. All right, so now we set up our username of test and a password of test22, and that gets us into the system. You can notice that network's all configured and working. Now we can run sudo apt-update, and it asks us for our sudo password. So we can run test22 again, and there's the command executing. Of course, we applied all of our updates in with libguestfs tools, so we're not going to have any updates, but sudo is working. But we'll type in exit here for a minute, and we can try root, and there was no password, so we'll just try no password. We could also try something, and excuse me. We could also try something like default, the exact way it showed in our cloud init file, just like that. And again, the password was in there as none, so we'll try no password, and then we can try again with none. And there seems to be no way to log in other than with test22. So there you have it. There's the way that I set up all of my cloud init images for Ubuntu and Debian and such, and get them to work and have actually a sudo password. It also seems to allow SSH passwords instead of insisting that we use an SSH key, which, depending on your production environment and your practices, that might be a big no-no. But for me, again, I'm usually doing a lot of testing. I just don't want to upload a key every single time that I do it and go through that process. And it might not be the best practices as far as security in a production environment, but a lot of times I'm doing testing for videos, and that's just the way I like it. So there's that, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something about how to do cloud init images today, or the way that I do cloud init images, and it helped you out. As always, have a good night, and thank you for watching.